Greetings, everybody, and welcome to another Chapter Happy Hour. My name is Will Clayton. I'll be your host and moderator, and joining me for tonight's conversation is Marissa Jensen and Renee Tomala, both of which who are heavily involved in PF and QF's Women on the Wing initiative. More on that later. Marissa is the Education and Outreach Program Manager for Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever, and Renee is a Senior Regional Representative based in North Dakota. Welcome, ladies.
Thanks, Will. Excited to be here.
Bit of housekeeping before we get going. If you've been on a Chapter Happy Hour before, you'll know this, but if you're new, if you do have a question, we'll take them live. Use the Q&A function at the bottom, and we'll do our best to get to all of them. It's easier to monitor the Q&A portion than it is the chat, so it's always best to do that. If we don't get to your question, just resend it to your regional representative, and they'll get it answered for you, or get it up to us, and we'll be sure to take care of it. So all of these are now recorded, and we put them on the PF and QF Chapter Leaders YouTube page. That was something we launched, I think, in December of 2021, so just recently, but all of the catalog of Chapter Happy Hours are there, as well as a ton of other great stuff, and we'll be continuing to add more content there. So don't feel bad if you have to jump off, but let's get rolling. Before we dive into tonight's topic, which we touched on just a hair, the Women on the Wing initiative, let's get a little bit of background from you two. Marissa, let's start with you. So tell us a little bit about your path to Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever, and what it means to be the Education and Outreach Program Manager.
Awesome. Thank you, Will. So I've been with the organization for a little over 3 years now. Prior to working for Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever, I spent many years as a veterinary technician, and then transitioned into a role in conservation, working for our state agency, and then found my home with the Habitat organization. One thing that I like to share, that many people might know already, but I didn't grow up as a hunter. I didn't grow up in a hunting family. I wasn't exposed to it really at all, and didn't start hunting until I was 30 years of age. And so I'm really passionate about not only helping others find their paths of the uplands, and opportunities to get outside and hunt, but also just to help share our conservation message with others. So it's very exciting. My role with the organization as Education and Outreach Program Manager is really exciting. I get to work with a lot of incredible volunteers and staff from across the country. I work with our organization's National Youth Leadership Council, which is a group of 20 to 25 high school students across the country who are interested in conservation leadership. I oversee our organization's Women on the Wing initiative, which we'll dive into a little bit more now. I won't spill the beans yet. And then I also am working to help build a new program that will give you guys a little sneak peek on, Journey to Conservation Careers. It's a high school curriculum program for kids who are interested in a career in conservation. So we're really excited to share more about that in the upcoming year. So keep your eyes open. But with that, I will pass it to Renee. I would love to know too, if I don't get in trouble for asking this, I'd love to know where everybody's from. I recognize some names on here, but if you want to put in the chat just your name and where you're from, I'd love to see where everybody's tuning in from.
Marissa, I don't think Will can yell at us for anything. So
No, it's a Chapter Happy Hour. We're just having a good time. Marissa, short hair pointers, is that right?
Oh, yeah. Is that a real question?
Oh, we'll get to the main stuff later. Let's talk about the bird dogs real quick.
More importantly, yes, I have 2 short hair pointers who are actually in the office here with me. So it'll be interesting to see how long they allow me to do this for without jumping in. But great dogs. I just absolutely love them, and couldn't wish for better ones. But I have hunted behind some pretty great dogs that aren't German short hair pointers, one of which is Renee's. So I tease that they're the best, but really any bird dog is a good dog.
What a transition. Renee, I haven't checked all the chat yet, but we've got chapter leaders checking in from all over. You're the senior regional representative for North Dakota. Tell us a little bit about your path to the organization and what it means to be the senior rep.
Absolutely. So I grew up in Minnesota and grew up hunting and fishing on a family farm. Really couldn't think of any other segue into life than to go to school to become a biologist and spend more of my time outside. And so I am a biologist by trade, and then found Pheasants Forever shortly after graduating from college. And I had moved out to North Dakota, and I have found my home with PF, just as Marissa said. So love what I do. I think it's probably fair to say that I am the less cool version of Will Clayton in Minnesota, or in North Dakota. But I am a senior field representative, so I get to coordinate and work alongside our volunteers in the state. And I see some of my most favorite volunteers and people are on here talking. So I'm just happy to be here.
Well, we're happy to have you both. And thank you for the compliment, Renee. I'll be sure to send some money your way for that, as per our usual agreement. So now that we understand who's here in terms of, delivering the content of the Women on the Wing, but we also kind of know who's here as far as our chapter leaders checking in at home, and that was really cool. So thanks for bringing that up, Marissa. And I'll let you take sort of the broad approach here. So our topic is Women on the Wing. Talk about that. Let's start from the very beginning. It's a relatively new initiative with the organization, but just bring us full circle at where it started and where we're at currently with Women on the Wing.
Yeah, absolutely. So officially, Women on the Wing launched in 2018. But what we know is that really it's been around for much longer than that. And in all the hard work that our volunteers and staff and even event participants, it's been something that has been building and growing for many, many, many years. So 2018 is when kind of decided to really put some structure to it so that we could, give it a name and help share the success that was already taking place with anyone and everyone. And since then, we've just continued to kind of build and grow it. It started with the National Women on the Wing event at our National Pheasant Fest and Quail Classic in 2019. And we'll make sure to share. There's a new one, another one coming up in March in Omaha, Nebraska for Pheasant Fest and Quail Classic this year that we'll make sure to drop a link in for everybody. And then, it just continued to build momentum. There's 4 programs that kind of fall under the Women on the Wing initiative. And one word there that I just kind of want to highlight is the word initiative. So really, Women on the Wing encompasses everything we do as an organization as far as our outreach and our efforts with providing more opportunities for women in conservation, women in the uplands, women in the organization. So we provide some opportunities with these 4 unique programs that fall underneath the initiative, but I just want to mention that it's really everything that we do as far as our women's focused efforts. The 4 programs are our 3 events. So recruit, retain, and reactivate. That's learn to hunt, learn to shoot. Then we have social events. So women, wine, and wild game events, pint nights, things like that. We have our landowner outreach, conservation outreach. So women landowners, women farmers and ranchers, our field staff work with a lot of them and help provide more opportunities and trainings and workshops. And then our Women on the Wing chapters. And I noticed that there's a couple of volunteers on here and chapter leaders on here that are very well versed in our Women on the Wing chapters. So those are kind of the 4 unique programs that fall under the Women on the Wing initiative structure.
I love it. And shout out to the legendary Longtails right here in Minnesota. I just want to get that plug in before Renee jumps in. But that's something that I think is so important. What you touched on, it's like conservation, uplands, the organization. It's more than just bringing women into the fold just for the sake of it. There's all these different dynamics within the organization that women can bring a fresh perspective to and more influence to. And the programs have just grown immensely, and they're really, really creative and really cool. And the chapters, at least the one that I work with here is carrying the torch for all things women in the outdoors. Renee, I know you've got a all-female chapter, the Capital City Ladybirds, in North Dakota. So maybe touch on, this is the chapter happy hours are designed for our chapter network, right? This is information we're delivering to them. So talk a little bit about the chapter structure and how you see, the female chapters kind of blossoming, or how they started, and then maybe even where they can go.
Thanks. Yes. So we do have the Ladybirds here in Bismarck, and we started them in 2018. I'm going to take a stab at that. I think that sounds about right. And they do operate just like traditional chapters do. They just have a more emphasis. They have more emphasis on women's targeted outreach. And so we're holding events like Women, Wine, and Wild Game, and plugging value into those 3 other pillars that Marissa mentioned. They're holding Hike for Habitat events to get families outside, women's wing shooting clinics every summer. So kind of whatever avenue we can get women outdoors through hiking, through fishing, through the uplands, through birding, kind of you name it, they serve that purpose. And these chapters, these Women on the Wing chapters, really just vibrant, dynamic networks of women all across the country. And they keep cropping up, which is my favorite thing to see. So we now have chapters in we have 7 chapters across the country. We've got North Dakota, Minnesota, 2 in Wisconsin, 1 in Arizona, Texas, and Ohio, which is just incredible. But
in South Dakota now too.
Yes, South Dakota. That was on my map. Thank you. South Dakota. So 8. So continuing to grow, but really they're just such strong networks of outdoors women that are there to provide those paths into the outdoors, whether it's family affairs just for women, kind of whatever your niche may be in the outdoors, or a niche you don't even know about yet, they serve that purpose, which I just love.
And if I'm not mistaken, did that chapter start with like the inaugural Wine, Women, and Wild Game?
Mm-hmm.
So, I've started a few chapters in Minnesota, and I'm sure any chapter leader that's on here right now is familiar with likely a chapter starter. Like, how did they get involved with the chapter? They've all got their path to PF and QF story, right? But Marissa talked about the programs or the social events. One is Wine, Women, and Wild Game, but how did you start a chapter that way, and how does that event look like, or how did it come to be?
So at one point in our PF past here in North Dakota, we were a staff of all women, fully employed by PF. And so we had this unique dynamic and unique perspective to tackle women's outreach. And I think it came about to our favorite things, but also how W's we could put into one sentence. So we held Women, Wine, and Wild Game on a Wednesday in Bismarck, and just tried to combine our favorite things and to break down a couple of barriers and speak from the heart and just tell some of our outdoor experiences, why we love it, why we love PF, what you can do within PF. And we had I would say sold out. It was a free event, but a packed room full of women that are sampling a variety of wild game with recipes to take home. And the room was just on fire. It was amazing. Just so much passion and so much sharing. And we just kind of skyrocketed into a chapter from there and never looked back.
Everybody loves an alliteration. That's perfect. And then this is another thing I wanted to touch on. I mean, obviously we've gone through sort of the chapter, how that chapter in particular got started, some of the events. Really quickly, on the website, or Marissa, maybe you can help me out. There are, at least for that event in particular, we've got a how-to guide for that, for the chapters listening at home. We've got resources built out if there's folks listening and they're like, oh, maybe this will work for us or whatever. Right? I mean, we have those resources available, correct?
We do, and we have money too. Like, this is the part where I'm like, oh, you get a car, you get a car. Nobody gets a car, but there are grant opportunities. I was actually just putting in the chat. I'm going to send it.
Oh, she muted.
You muted.
I don't know how I did that.
And you're
but
back.
Everybody would like to know how to just mute Marissa. So I just went ahead and put in the chat the link for how to host a Women, Wine, and Wild Game event. Just a quick note that is certainly a guideline. It provides some information to help you get started. The most important thing that I want to touch on really quick with really any of our events, there's going to be some guidelines, especially if there's a grant associated with it, which I'll touch base on. But really, the biggest thing is that you make these events your own, and you make them, you identify your goals, your target audience, and that's, what you focus on moving forward. We do get a lot of questions as far as, if it's a Women on the Wing event, does it have to be women only? The answer is absolutely not. We want these events to be women focused. Obviously, the motivation and the goals are, sorry, my dog's playing in the background now. The motivations and goals are to, provide more opportunities for women to get involved in the outdoors. But that can look really different. Renee touched on family events. There have been couple events. There have been events that are open to the general public that are, any gender, but they're also just specifically, trying to introduce more women. We get a lot of questions, Will, can you host a Women on the Wing event? You absolutely can. Our biggest, goal is that there are opportunities for women to be leaders in those situations. So if you have a chapter leader that, is a male and wants to host a Women on the Wing event, if you could, work with some women in the area to help kind of take over and provide some leadership, it just provides more opportunities for more people to kind of step into that role. So we're here for any questions that may arise, as it comes to that, but we're really working on being more inclusive. And that can look a lot differently depending on what your goals are. So just keep that in mind. As we talk about grants, we do have several grants available that are able to be used for Women on the Wing events. So our Women, Wine, and Wild Game social events, we do have, thanks to our wonderful partners at Walton's, up to $500 that is reimbursable for your Women, Wine, and Wild Game event. So really the biggest thing with that is that we want to make sure we celebrate and appreciate our partner by highlighting them in logos and our marketing materials. And then we do ask for reports after the event and just receipts. And really that's it to apply for one of those grants. You don't even have to call it a Women, Wine, and Wild Game event. You don't even have to serve wine if you really don't want to. So just some really good opportunities to help provide some funding for your events. Also along those lines, Learn to Hunt and Learn to Shoot events. We do have same up to $500 grant available for your events. They're focused on adult Learn to Hunt, Learn to Shoot events. So this absolutely applies to Women on the Wing. If you're looking to host a Learn to Hunt, Learn to Shoot event for adult women, you can absolutely apply for that. So I will work on Renee or I will get that link dropped into the chat as well and make sure that you guys all have an opportunity to check those out. I just ran on forever. I'm sorry. I could talk about
totally
this all day.
I didn't have any more questions. So.
Good.
The grant link is in the chat box.
Perfect.
Most
Thank you,
definitely.
Renee.
And I think that's something I just want to clarify or at least expand on. Any chapter can host a Women on the Wing event.
Any chapter. Every chapter.
Every chapter can. And I encourage every chapter too, right? I love what you touched on there. It's like, a lot of our chapters are male-led, that's fine, but elevating the leadership to women within the chapter or women within the community is one of two things. I mean, you're bringing more people into the fold, right? I don't know that there's a chapter that exists in the country that wouldn't want more help and more perspective. And I spend a lot of time thinking about engagement and recruitment. And what a better tool than what we have built here for you to use. But again, to your point of it doesn't need to be a Wine, Women, and Wild Game event. I think, in my opinion, the best ideas come from the field. And clearly, Renee and this initiative built out a few, but I'm excited as we continue to build this to see what comes of it, right? what worked in North Dakota might not work in Maryland or certainly in Southern California. And I just really want to encourage chapters that are listening or that watch this when we get the recording up on YouTube to, think outside the box and just open up that umbrella a little bit. And there's a quick Google search would likely find a women's group nearby that might be focused on conservation. Certainly women landowners if you're within sort of the rural part of the country. And that's something I don't want to gloss over either is one of the main programs within this is the Landowner Outreach component, right? And I don't have the numbers in front of me, and nor would I ever remember them, but there's a lot of data behind the fact that many women are going to inherit property or that will become landowners at some point, or there's a vast majority of women that are absentee landowners. And walking into the FSA office or meeting with one of my farm bill biologists or one of the farm bill biologists in the country, that's a fantastic tool as well. But these, they make, what do these events look like? And like, how do women get involved with them? And is it just a better place to come together and learn about our conservation policies there and how we can help? Or how are those events designed? Or how does that component of the Women on the Wing initiative work?
Yeah, great question, Will. So I was just pulling up some information here, and I don't think we have the information quite yet for the newest census, but the last data that we received is that there's approximately 1 million women farmers and ranchers in the United States, owning 1/3 of all farmland and ranch land. And then in addition to that, there's 87 million acres that are owned by non-operating women landowners. So it's remarkable. It's something that I didn't know prior to working in this role, and talking to others. It's not necessarily just widespread knowledge, and it's just fascinating. And so I think these events can look again similar to everything that we do. They're going to look a little bit different based on what your goals and objectives are, what state you're in. But really, it's just an opportunity for women to come together and build a community. I think that's one of the most important things with all the events we do is building community. So they come together, build community. They can learn about ways to improve wildlife habitat and conservation practices and management on their properties, whether they're landowners or operators. And then, really, it's just an opportunity to get them familiar with not only the organization, but just what those practices do, not only for, conservation for the land, the soil, the air, all of that, but then how that actually can help improve their practices and their goals, on those properties. They're really incredible, and they can take all day, and there can be field tours, but we've also seen really neat combinations of these events where we've seen like a women, wine, and wild game or a pint night paired with a habitat tour, and talking about the connections that pollinators have on those properties with the foods that we eat and the beverages that we drink. I don't know anybody who wouldn't want to go to that event. And so we see some really neat ideas of just connecting the dots. And that's the biggest thing here is connecting the dots with, why do we care about pollinators? Why do we care about habitat management on these properties? Why do we care if it's, a place where pheasant and quail broods, can really survive and thrive? And so it's just really kind of eye-opening for individuals that come that just haven't ever really heard that information before.
Absolutely. And one, completely impressed you pulled those numbers out that quickly. It's almost like you prepared, because I didn't prepare for that. And the fact that you were able to provide such an eloquent response to my wordy question. So well done on that. And I am forever smarter now. Thank you for lighting me on that, for sure. It's just a compliment fest on the happy hour today, that's for sure. All right, so we've touched on a lot of the programs. I think it's pretty apparent that this is an initiative, not a program, right? This is an all-encompassing organization-wide initiative to increase women participation at all levels of the organization. And Renee, with that, I'm a rep as well. So are you. So I'm just going to take us and switch us right back into the chapter world. I'm on the website you dropped in the chat, obviously under the participate section, went to women on the wing, and then I'm scrolling, and there's an upcoming events tab right there. And you click that, and it's somehow populated with a bunch of women's events all across the country. And obviously we're chapter focused here, and there's a lot of chapter leaders in the chat, and they're going to watching at home and we'll be watching later on. So talk a little bit about, while we mentioned the word reporting earlier, I know that's kind of a swear word, but it's important, and talk about some of the logistics that chapters might need if they're going to set up some type of event, be it through any of the programs offered under the Women on the Wing initiative. Whenever you're ready, Marissa and we can fill time.
Well, I am happy to jump in while I don't know if she's having some tech issues with her.
Having some tech issues. You just stay right there. Marissa, same question.
One of the things that I will kind of comment on while it looks like she's getting there, but one of the things I will comment on is that, as Renee talks a little bit about reporting and setting up your events and everything, we get so excited when we have that information shared with us, as far as, what events are taking place, how many participants are attending. I mean, that's information that we want to celebrate with you. We want to know about. Not only that, we can then take that to our partners. Walton's was an example there. Alps Outdoors. There's a lot of really incredible partners who provide funding for us to create tools and resources and grant opportunities to help fund the events that are happening on these local levels. And when we can go back and say, this is how many events that we've had, this is how many participants, they'll help fund future events. So not only can we celebrate the success, we can also take that information, share it with the partners, and help provide more funding opportunities for more events. So it's just this beautiful circle of sharing and helping each other. And if that wasn't enough, I have more. When we work on, grant opportunities for, when we're applying for grants to help fund some of these efforts, we can actually use volunteer hours and data as match for grants, meaning we can actually use the time that you guys spend, putting on these events and the work that you do, and we can actually help fundraise around that so that we can provide more funds for you. Again, another beautiful circle of just, celebrating the success, sharing the information, and being able to provide more funds to continue doing what we do best.
Yeah, well said. For those of you that are listening at home that have been on a few of these, you'll realize there's a lot of employees at Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever whose sole role is to serve you, the chapter leader, and the people within the organization that deliver the mission at the local level. And I've been in those meetings where we get to present the fund numbers to our partners, and I know it's not fun to report, but we've made it as easy as we can. Your rep can always help, but it's really eye-opening. Not only to us, we know what's going on, at least to the best of our ability, but to share those numbers with funding partners and to tell your story. So then we can go out, try to find some money or design programs for you to create more of that and create that beautiful circle. Or I think we might have two circles going on now, but you get my point. So I hope that resonates with the folks listening at home. And if you haven't reported your events, or if you want to, you need to figure that out, ask your regional rep. They'll be sure to lead you into the right direction. Renee, are you off mute? Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. I swear I didn't go anywhere. I'm sure you could see me panicking, but I dropped the landing page in the chat box, and then my Zoom window completely went away and wouldn't come back up. So I'm here.
Happy to have you back.
Thanks. I will play off of those. Both very important messages that you just put out there. I want to put a feather in the cap for Event Center, which is our new norm for holding events. And the amazing thing about Event Center is that when you put in an event and you have women anywhere in the title, it automatically populates it onto the Women on the Wing landing page, which I just put in the chat box. So if you click on it, it will show upcoming events and it will direct them to be able to find those events even better, which is just one less thing that we have to do and just another easier way for folks to find your events, which is amazing. And it helps capture that data for us too. So it helps make reporting easier, and it's just kind of it's one step closer to being more integrated. So the numbers are incredibly important to keeping the people in place and that make the programs, and then that help that at the chapter level. So it's important.
100%. So for folks familiar with Event Center, you're just setting up an event like you normally would, and you literally just have to put women in the title, and it's gonna populate it right there. Yeah, that's 21st century Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever right there. That I never thought we'd be able to handle. That's great. And for those of you that aren't comfortable with Event Center, or maybe your chapter hasn't dove into it yet, we did roll it out during 2020. So not everyone's jumped on there yet, but your regional rep's going to be able to help. And we've actually got YouTube tutorial videos on the same channel that we're going to be dropping this on. So if you want to get comfortable with that, it's also a really great way. One of these events might be a scaled down version of a banquet, right? It's a couple hours. You're not selling all these crazy tickets. So it's a good experience to drop in a women only event or a women on the wing event in Event Center to use it there. So perfect. We've got some chat going. Now's a good time. If folks listening at home do have a question, Renee and Marissa have done a really good job of sort of getting to some of these. If you've got one, that's great. We sort of went through chapter logistics. I'll just leave it up. We've got a half an hour. I'll kind of start to tie a bow on this thing, but Women on the Wing, obviously it started in 2018, roughly. That's our establishment time, at least we'll call it that. Marissa, maybe I'll let you lead this off. What does the future look like? I mean, both of you have kind of touched on how amazing it is to see the chapters grow, the initiative grow, the more people we're bringing into the fold. And obviously, we can host these through any chapter, every chapter. And that's news to me and maybe news to folks here, but where are we going? And I doubt there's a ceiling, but where do you think we're going in the next 3 to 5 years?
Everywhere.
Excellent. Renee, on to you.
Mic drop. I think we're just so excited to continue to see this grow. One of the things that I will mention is, when we look at, the R3 world, and I mentioned earlier, recruit, retain, reactivate. We use that a lot in our learn to hunt, learn to shoot, kind of hunting heritage, discussions, but it really applies for, everything we do. And the reason I say that is because, women are the fastest growing demographic in hunting currently, but they're also the fastest to leave. And so one of the things that we recognize when we look at R3 initiatives or R3 efforts is that social support is the most important thing to helping somebody get from a trial phase of they're introduced to something, they're recruited, they're interested, they start it. But without that social support, a lot of times people just aren't confident enough or comfortable enough, whatever it may be, to continue on without support. And so really, I think it's important that in everything that we do, especially with Women on the Wing, but really across the entire organization, is build community, build that social support. It's so important. And that doesn't have to be, a ton of extra work or anything, structured even. I'd love if, Renee would want to talk a little bit, briefly about the Rooster Rally they do. I mean, it's a really great example of continuing social support at the end of a season, and just thinking of ways to follow up with past participants. The biggest thing that I would think everybody should ask themselves as they're, putting on an event is, are my participants going to ask what's next? Or am I providing them with something that they can go to, whether it's something that, I put on myself or something that I can steer them to help them on their path. So just a couple of things to think about. And if Renee's willing, I totally put her on the spot with this, but they do a pretty cool thing in North Dakota that I think would be fun to share.
Yeah, so every year, typically about December, when it's nice and cold here in North Dakota, we hold an annual Rooster Rally. And Honestly, it's just an excuse to go hunting. So we just pick a day, typically just a time frame. We have a map of North Dakota that we put a couple contacts across with some information, and then folks from that area can pick a contact number to get in touch with and devise a plan to get out in the field. We hunt public land, some private if it's available, but mostly just public. And we just go out for a really informal hunt, and there's not much to it. You can meet for coffee before or after, but we just get out in the field together and have fun. So it's a nice way to put maybe practices that you've learned at wing shooting clinics or from learn to shoot events into practice. Another nice touch for learn to hunt events if you're just kind of hitting your stride with hunting and you want that support of women around you, but it's just a reason to go hunting. And so we kind of scattered across the state and just allow folks to reach out, or you can go on your own, honestly, and just share with the Rooster Rally hashtag. And we kind of hope that it goes outside of North Dakota and it kind of gets contagious. So we love to see when folks from all over go out on their own and share their day with us. So it's a pretty cool event.
Yeah, so there's the plug for 2022 season hashtag Rooster Rally. And Renee is I love it. That team is so humble about it's just a day to go hunting, but it really is such a neat opportunity. If you have somebody who has gone to a learn to hunt event, they feel confident enough to go again, but they maybe don't have anybody to go with that they know, or they're not comfortable going on their own, and they don't really need to do another learn to hunt event. It's like, what's available for that person? They're kind of in this weird, interim. And so what Rooster Rallies and, opportunities like that, where it's kind of an organized, semi-organized, structure, it just gives somebody an opportunity to go out again and kind of dip their toes into what it's like to do it a little bit more outside of a traditional event. So something to just kind of keep in mind with your chapters, moving forward is what are some ways that, it's not a ton of work on your end, and maybe you even get to enjoy the day and hunt or do something alongside these participants, but, how can you build that community, build that social support for these participants that are coming to your events?
And I think that's a great spot to really start to wind down here. I think it's absolutely critical that, if you're trying to engage and recruit women, but anybody to your chapter, always assume that anyone that comes to your event is going to ask what's next. And if they made the first step to come to your banquet, or maybe a learn to shoot event, learn to hunt event, have something for them. And it doesn't need to be the next day, the next weekend. We all have lives outside of Pheasants Forever, even the three of us, believe it or not. But get in the mindset of, year-round activity, at least, or not just a chapter that hosts a banquet and maybe a youth hunt. Like, let's try to bring more people into the fold by engaging them throughout the year. The Rooster Rally is a great example of something that can answer the question, what's next? But Marissa, to your point of building community and social support, I mean, I want to go really bad, and that's like, I'm not allowed. I know that. I can compliment Renee as much as I want. I'll never get the invite, but it is a beautiful example of what we can do and the power of our local chapters. And that's something that can be replicated everywhere. And mix in a couple more events that don't take a ton of time, a ton of effort, and you really got yourself a program built. You've got yourself a program built underneath the Women on the Wing initiative. If we're speaking particular about women, and we are this evening. So I really want to thank you two for joining, and you've cleaned up a ton of the questions here already. We don't have any open right now. I want to end on this because it was touched on, and we're less than a month away from Pheasant Fest and Quail Classic, Omaha, the Women on the Wing luncheon. So this is the second annual. Is that my understanding? Again, I'm not allowed to this either. So
no, fourth.
Fourth.
I think it's the fourth.
You know what? Whatever it is, tell me about it. What's going on there, and where can we get more information?
That's a great question. So, you can go onto our website at pheasantsforever.org, quailforever.org, whichever bird you want to pick. And there is information on Pheasant Fest right there on our homepage. You can navigate it there. Or we'll link it in here for you, but those that are tuning in later, let me just pull the link up here. And well, I was going to, but my internet's going to be slow because I'm trying to do it live. We'll put the link in and we'll share it on there, but it's right on the homepage for Pheasant Fest. The Women on the Wing event this year is on March 12th. So that's Saturday. Doors open at 11:30 a.m. Central Standard Time, with the event really kicking off at noon, but you'll want to get there early enough so that you can get in the door and get seated. And then it ends at 1:30. So we'll gather, we'll eat some food, we'll drink some beverages, we'll listen to some speakers. This year's theme is leading through the generations. So really just identifying incredible women conservation leaders, past, present, and the future. So we're really, really looking forward to this event. And it's in Omaha, Nebraska, which is my backyard. So come see me.
Renee, you'll be there?
Yes, one more shameless plug. We have a bunch of phenomenal women that will be presenting on kind of all of the stages, the wild game cooking stage, Path to the Uplands, including myself. So I invite you not to come watch that. But we have lots of strong women, dog trainers, wild game chefs, you name it. They're littered across all of the stages. So check out the highlight schedules so that you can hop in where you want to.
Perfect. Well, that wraps it up for me, ladies. I want to thank you again for joining and had some really great conversation and content, and I really appreciate it. So hold on, we got one last minute. Somebody check on the chat. We got one. I was going to wrap it up, but they got it in last minute.
There's a good question. So from Dawn, is there anything really to help the ladies enjoy and feel comfortable, as dog handlers and guides are almost all men, very few ladies to help run the event? The ladies hunt with another woman, only 2 hunters per field. I think it's kind of, it is what you make it. So you have to be inclusive. You have to have the right attitude approaching these events. You need to be welcoming, let them feel embraced and comfortable at those events. Honestly, your local NAVDA chapter probably has a lot of really talented women dog handlers, and that's what we utilize here. And so we kind of get a really good mixed bag of just strong female leads across these as mentors and as dog handlers. So the opportunities are out there, and I'm sure that any of your reps can help you find that those potential leads for you as well. Marissa,
100%.
add?
No, I mean, that was perfect, Renee. One thing that you can consider too is hosting one of those social events like a women, wine, and wild game, or a pint night, focusing on women on the wing. And, maybe there's some additional individuals in the area who would be interested in helping or participating that maybe just wasn't even aware that there was, Pheasants Forever or Quail Forever in the area. So sometimes just casting out a wider net to see what kind of interest is in your area. And then the other thing that I just want to mention that I didn't before, and we talk a lot about it a lot, is that just everybody is a very unique individual, which is great. How boring would it be if we were all the same? And so everybody learns differently. Everybody has different levels of comfort. Some women might not mind, having a male mentor. Some might not feel comfortable with that. So it just completely depends on the individual. So I always think that it's really great to just approach any situation with a participant and, asking them, what are their goals for that day? What does a successful day look like for them? And just kind of getting to know them. Sometimes you'd be surprised.
Absolutely. I think kind of one more, Will, I'm sorry.
You go right ahead.
Just kind of vetting your mentors and your dog handlers too. Who's going to be respectful, who's going to be welcoming, and who's not. And so you kind of know who to put in the field and which personality types will work best at a women's targeted event. So kind of just try to vet the folks involved with the event. If it's the Will Claytons of the world, have at it. You're good.
I'm just kidding.
Fuck,
Will.
one more compliment in there. Unbelievable.
That's a great
All right.
point.
Yeah, well said. And again, thank you two for joining. For those of you at home, March 1st, we're going to record and release on YouTube exclusively a conversation with Anna Swarzek about classroom habitat education programs. And then March 21st, live, Stacy Beckler and Monica Pothin are going to talk about what goes where, banquet reporting, CMS. We're going to hit them with all the hard questions. And I'm sure Stacy and Monica will do a great job. So look for that invite from your regional rep. We're excited to have both conversations in the month of March, one just on YouTube and one live with me here. Until then, take care, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.